what do we mean? What do we mean when we talk about team culture, right? So it's really, there's so many things we could say that culture is, but this is how I kind of put it in a nutshell. And words matter, so I am going to actually read this, but not to be boring, just because I think language is really important. So team culture is a collective mindset and the behaviors that define how your team operates. So when you think about that and you think about the mindset of all the different people and personalities that make up your team, and then all the different behaviors that then define how that team operates, it creates that subculture, that team culture of how that team operates. It also reflects some of the things that are unsaid, right? What's underlying in that group, right? What are the values, right? How does that group approach making big decisions? How do they deal with conflict, right? What are some of those unspoken like norms, right, that are happening on that team that are contributing to the experience of a person working on that team? And when we have a healthy culture, right, when we have a healthy team culture, we understand the individual motivations and not just the leader. Sometimes we put a lot of pressure on the leader's the only one accountable for the team culture. But the reality is we are all accountable for our team culture when we are part of the team. Yes, the leader may have different just sort of different abilities to shift or guide the culture, but each of us are really accountable, right? So a healthy team culture takes all of those individual motivations, all the things that are important to us, and collectively creates this experience where people feel valued and empowered. So many of us have been on healthy teams, and some of us have actually been on unhealthy teams. So we're going to do a little word association here. So if you've ever been on a really healthy team, maybe it's the team that you're on now, I hope it is for your sake. I want you to share one word. What's the experience of working on a team with a healthy culture? Share that one word in the chat, right? What's the one word that you would to describe trust, connected, communication, collaboration, safe? So a lot of trust, productive, energizing, optimistic. I see a lot of collaboration, empowering, belonging, authentic, safety. I see a lot of safety. Awesome. Collaborative, safe, right? So these are those things we want. Team, right? Right? We really have that sense of team. Trust, right? Trust is so important. Safety, trust, collaboration, inspiring, empowering. Now, I'm going to ask you the opposite. We've all been on a team that's not been so healthy. So what's the one word you would use to describe the experience of working in that unhealthy team? Distressing, toxic, exhausting, draining, negative, painful, dysfunctional, ego-driven, fear, exhausting, toxic. We see a lot of toxic, stagnant, right? Sometimes it's boring, right? Mistrustful, like a lack of trust, stressful, unsafe, right? There's that word again, safety, right? Too many chiefs, not enough employees. Yes. Exhausting, right? Frustrating, right? So we can see what team you would want to work on, right? Is that healthy, aligned team, right? Now, does every team operate like that every single day, all day long? Even some of the healthiest team cultures, challenging. Even some of the healthiest team cultures will have challenges along the way. And sometimes just one change, like one person leaves, or there's some kind of organizational change, an external or an internal change can shift that team culture very quickly, right? So we know what it feels like when it's when team culture is healthy. We know what it feels like when team culture is not healthy. So here are just some key elements of team culture, and then we're going to dive into using Cloverleaf to touch on some of these. So we want to look at communication patterns, right? And now this is also impacted by, is the team virtual? Is the team hybrid? Is the team dispersed, right? How does the team collaborate? How do they get together? How open are those conversations, right? Are they ever in the same place at the same time, right? And what's the pattern of communications, and are they collaborative? There are a lot of factions, is there a lot of miscommunication, right? How does the team deal with conflict, right? So teams that use conflict, and I'm talking about task conflict here, not necessarily personal conflict, the highest performing teams use task conflict as a source of innovation, right? And so if teams avoid conflict at all costs, not only is there this air of inauthenticity, but there is also an innovation factor that happens. So how does this team resolve conflict? What are the shared values, right? Are the team values aligned with what's important to each individual person? We arrive at work or at our computer, whatever it is, we arrive to our work environment each day with our unique values and our unique motivations. Do we share them? Are they aligned? Can we find some alignment and connection? And also, this is in terms of engagement and motivation. You can tell a lot about a team's culture if based upon how engaged they are and how motivated they are, not just individually, not just to seek out their own aspirations, but to seek out the wellness and goodness of the team, right? How does the team operate, right? So, what is actually driving, what's igniting your team's sense of I'm in this, or I'm driven, or I'm all in, right? What's driving it? What is the glue that is keeping your team together? Okay, so we're going to spotlight on culture pulse for a minute, and I'm going to hop over. And before we do that, if you would share, Jason, if you would please share the resource. So Jason is going to share in the chat the resource. So in the resource, all of the exercises that I am explaining are going to be provided in much more detail. So you don't need the slides, you don't need to screenshot anything. There's a complete resource in what Jason is sharing. And what I would suggest is you bookmark that resource. What we will do within 24 hours is we will put the recording to that you're of this webinar right now. We're going to embed it in this resource. So you will have the video and then you will also have the resource. Okay. Now, if we want to get at team culture, let's say you're on a team, whether you're the leader or you're an individual contributor or you're supporting leaders, and you want to get a sense of what I want to like take the temperature of the current team culture. What I'm going to be sharing with you, these are exercises you can do that will elicit conversations that will help you understand the culture more, understand the gaps, and understand the strengths of that team's culture, right? So even if we're talking about something that's very specific to the team and it may not sound like it's about culture, what you're doing is you're observing how is that team interacting about that topic, and you're going to get a sense of what the team culture is based upon the interaction, right? So this is a little bit of a meta exercise in that by having these conversations, you will get to observe the team culture, whether you're an individual contributor, a manager, or someone who is supporting a leader or a manager with their team. So I'm going to go to Culture Pulse, and I'm going to go to the organizational effectiveness feature of Culture Pulse. So I'm going to hop right here onto the team dashboard. What I've done, this is the customer team here at Cloverleaf. So what I've done, just to not distract you, is I've sort of pulled up all the other assessments. I want to make sure that, and also if it helps you to learn to pull up your own team dashboard or a dashboard in your Cloverleaf account to look at some of your results, if that helps you, you can do that as well. We're going to specifically be talking about organizational effectiveness. Now, when you look at Culture Pulse, you will notice there is a green circle around you. So it'll place you, it'll show you where you are in the spectrum of this organizational effectiveness piece right here. So the Culture Pulse assessment in general really helps you in real time to understand a little bit more of what's happening in that team culture, right? So you can use what I'm about to share with you. You can use this exercise for a team meeting. You can use it for an offsite. You can use it for team development time, or maybe if you're working with sub teams, you can use it as well. So I want you to consider that right now, this particular team, so this is the customer team here at Cloverleaf, has what we call a balanced distribution of people across means and goal. So what does that mean? We're talking about organizational effectiveness. So when a team has a good mix of means-oriented people and goal-oriented people, they're balancing out their why. The people that are concerned with the why are the means-oriented people, and the how, or the goal-oriented people, right? And so the they're kind of mixing these two perspectives to create this balanced sense of goal orientation and means orientation. This can be super helpful when a goal-oriented team, right? They're straying from the original purpose or up the project or idea. They're just trying to get there. The means-oriented team members are going to hold the why front and
Hey,
center,
hey
and they're
Stephanie,
going
can you zoom in a little bit real quick? Sorry to
to
interrupt.
know if it's going to allow me to do that. Oh, see, it's taking it off the page. Let's see if I can do that. Yeah, I can do that a little bit. Okay.
Thank you. I
Okay.
think
So, yeah, so our means oriented friends are sort of enjoying the process, and the goal oriented friends are kind of looking to get there, right? And the means oriented folks are focused on some of the why, right? And so when we have that balance, right, what that means is, let's say the means oriented people are stuck in creating intention and they get more philosophical or maybe even theoretical. What the people on the goal oriented side are going to do is they're going to provide a more tactical approach, right? They're going to get down to what we call brass tacks, right? So a team that has enough people distributed across this way, we would say is balanced, right? And so, for example, let's say we're in a group of people and we want to understand a little bit more about how we interact and how we focus on accomplishing goals, right? So I have what I have here on my slide, and what's also in your resource are some coaching questions. So, for example, how do we leverage this balance right now? What you're looking for is examples from the team to discuss how are we leveraging this balance of why and how? How are we leveraging this focus on the means versus the goal? Like, how are we leveraging that right now? Give an example of a project, right, where we balance out these two different sides of the spectrum of organizational effectiveness. What's a specific project, right? That if we leaned into this balance right now, that we need to kind of lean into this is who we are, this is an aspect of our team culture. How could we apply this, right? And again, you're basically what you're doing is you're putting pause on the day-to-day working for a group of people, and you're allowing them to examine how they're operating, right? Many times we're very focused on transactional teams meetings that get things done. We don't talk about how we work, and teams need time to do that. So never underestimate the value of team building time. And this allows people to put pause, to talk about, to work on how they're working, not just in their tasks. What can people on one end of the spectrum of organizational effectiveness learn from the opposite end? So, what I'll often do is if I'm in a group of people or a team, I'll say, okay, Melanie, who's more towards means, what do you want people like Andrew, who's more towards goal? What do you want them to understand about you? Right. So, what I'm trying to do is also create more team cohesion using people that are on opposite ends of that organizational effectiveness spectrum. So, what these conversations are doing is you're using this data to conduct a conversation that will allow you to observe team culture. You cannot observe team culture without intention, right? You need some intention to observe team culture. So, what you're trying to do is foster conversations that will help you elicit information and attitudes and perspective to understand the culture of that team at this time. For example, again, like what I shared with you, what is someone on your opposite colleagues? What do you want your opposite colleagues to understand about you more? Right. And then you would do this vice versa. So, for example, I would ask Andrew, what do you want someone like Melanie to understand about how you're focused more on the goal, right, than the means, than that purpose, right? So, so you really just want to use this. Just you could just take one aspect of culture pulse to facilitate a conversation to understand how is the team working towards goals, right? What's the difference between how some people approach goal accomplishment, and how can we, what are some specific areas of things we're working on now as a team that we can lean into this diversity? Okay. So I'm going to pause there if you have any questions. I don't know if there's anything. Brent said, oh, good. Thanks, Brent. So yeah, I am focusing on, we tend to overly focus on the other assessments. So I'm glad this is resonating. So I wanted to kind of dive into some of the culture assessments. We kind of over focus on the other ones. And I want to give you some conversations that you can have with people specifically around culture that will elicit that information. If you have any questions as we're going along, please, please, please pop them in the chat. Again, all of the outline of this exercise and these questions is in the chat. Now, if you think of any other questions that you think would be good to ask people who face goal accomplishment in a different way, you can also feel free to throw those in the chat as well. We want this to be collaborative. Like, what are some other things you might ask a team who is dispersed like this around focusing more on why they are climbing versus focusing on how I'm gonna, accomplish that goal. If there's any other questions you think would be interesting, you can pop them in the chat as well. Okay. All right. So what if you have an imbalanced distribution of team members? So let's say you have more people that are over here in the means area, right? So when team members are clustered and reflect more means-oriented behavioral tendencies, sometimes they can get stuck in creating. They can get stuck in theoretical, conceptual areas, and they kind of they'll be leading with a lack of clarity, right? And so let's say you're working with a team, they're all kind of focused here, right? And you want them to adopt more of those best practices or incorporate more of those best practices with a more goal orientation. So here are some questions then you could use to try to expand the scope of how that team is operating, which impacts their culture directly. So for example, you might want to ask this particular team, what are you doing tactically? Like, how are your meetings actually happening? Or how is strategic planning happening? What helps you actually focus on outcomes? This is a great coaching question for a team because now you're creating an opportunity. What could you create that will help you incorporate more of this goal orientation into how your team is operating, right? So now we're getting down to those brass tacks, which is what goal orientation folks tend to focus on, right? And we're asking that team that's clustered on the left what they can actually do, right? And then knowing that we are kind of clustered, this particular team is not clustered, but knowing that we are clustered here, what does that mean for us? Like, what other insight about how our team operates could we reflect on, right? So we're kind of looking at a cultural dynamic and then asking us, what does that perspective offer us? Okay. What's the current impact of this aspect of the team? Oh, well, for example, if we were working with a team that was all kind of clustered in the means end of the spectrum, I might ask them, can you give me an example of a time where you got stuck in analysis paralysis? What was the impact of getting stuck, right? How did you get out of it? What did you do, right? I want to understand how they're operating and how they're getting themselves out of some tough situations, right? How does us being in this on this opposite end of the spectrum, this one end of the spectrum, how does it impact how we all communicate, right? So, oh, well, sometimes I feel like I want to push us more towards a goal, but we enjoy some of that brainstorming process, and I don't want to take us, away from them, right? How does it also impact team conflict that we're all kind of clustered towards more of this purpose-driven, aspect of it, and we're lacking some of that goal orientation? What support this team, as it is right now, what support does the team need to focus more time and energy on that goal orientation, right? So for example, let's say you're the manager of the team and you need to understand, how to get your team to be more goal oriented. We're going to understand where they are on this spectrum, and then we're going to ask them what they need, right? What they need for that support to be able to make those well-balanced decisions towards goal orientation, right? And so what this conversation is going to unearth cultural dynamics of the team. It's going to allow whether you're an individual contributor, whether you're the leader of that team, or whether you're a facilitator coming in to support that team, it's going to unearth some of those cultural dynamics, and it's going to lead you with some information where you can then help that team set some goals to either sustain what's positive in their culture or to improve where there's a gap in their culture, where they need more support. Does anyone have any questions so far? Any other questions? Yes, I believe this was developed internally, Culture Pulse, and not as like a adoptee. But we're going to get confirmation on some of the research behind it as well. Okay. All right. So now what if you've got more people towards the other end? So what if you've got, now let's just say you've got this, let's make believe this is the whole team and they're all over here in this goal orientation end. So let's make believe none of these people exist, and you're dealing with a team of 5 or 6 people and they're all towards this goal orientation. So team members that are focused more towards the goal oriented end of the spectrum, they're probably awesome at getting things done, right? They're the people that are like, you're going to go to when you want to move something forward. Here's the challenge. They get so focused on results that they sometimes have to realign with purpose and intention, and even re-examine processes from time to time, right? So they're sometimes missing context. So people that are on that goal-oriented end of the spectrum, they're going to move fast to get things done, to get the goal over the finish line, right? They're getting the ball over the goal, right? So for example, when a team sits and sets yearly objectives, right, that fulfill business priorities, that explain exact metrics, you want to also make sure that you document the purpose and intention of why we're doing this. And if there's processes that need to be evaluated or reevaluated, you want to make sure you set benchmarks with this team that they're able to do that, right? So the people that are going to be clustered towards this end, they're going to run with the ball. They're just running with the ball. They're not stopping to look around them, right? They're just running the ball, right? They're like, we've got to go. We've got to get this over, right? And so sometimes they will miss key details. They'll miss, oh, we have to adjust the goal, right? Something has changed. We set this big goal at the beginning of the year. Now something has changed, right? So it's about sort of being a little bit, creative, right, about that line of sight, right? And what we might have to stop, we might have to pause. So what are some coaching questions you might ask people that are clustered at this end of the spectrum? You want to ask them, how does all of us being so goal focused, right? How is it working for us? Oh, it's great because we constantly have our numbers up to show like we're focused on the prize. It's awesome, right? And how often does this team actually reflect after a project? How often does this team do a postmortem? Oh, well, no, we just want to move to the next thing, right? So that's a great team practice to suggest, right? No matter, again, if you're an individual contributor or you're the leader of the team or you're facilitating with that team, is that actually brings more insight, right? Which can help us as we approach the next goal. And do they have any process at all for examining processes for updates, right? Is there any process improvement mechanism with that team? And again, just by talking about this, you're going to get a sense of how this team interacts. You're going to get a sense about this team's culture. And then if we were to just do an experiment, right, is there anything good that can come over this team kind of slowing down, right, to speed up? Right. So often teams that are really focused in that goal orientation, they don't want to do a team development time. They're like, no, I want to keep making calls or I want to keep working on this project. They don't want to stop and think, except there's value in stepping outside of the work for a minute, just a minute, not too long, and it can contribute to the quality of the work that gets done. There's a ton of research around the implication of pause team development and how it greatly impacts productivity, engagement, and team cohesion once that team goes back to their daily tasks. So, you want to just be mindful that some people are going to resist taking people out to have that conversation, but you can really I've just shared one aspect, one of the 5 features of Culture Pulse, and look at all the conversations you could have. You could do an entire morning on this based upon where people are in this area. Any questions at all? Any questions at all? Yeah, so Linda, like they're like, what's the next step? The how is like, how do we get there? Right. And the means is the why, the purpose, the foundation. Right. And so it really is about sort of some of the context. So the means folks are kind of focused on some of the context, right? Why are we doing this? How is it going to better us? Does there need to be something need to change in how we're doing things, in order to get there? Whereas the goal-oriented person is like, what's the next step? Well, what's going to further us? Like, what do we do? It's the doing, right? Any other questions just about any of the insights, just specifically with organizational effectiveness? All right, I'm going to hop onto management philosophy. This, I feel, is the most important aspect of Culture Pulse. And here's why, right? So let's talk about management philosophy. We're going to go down here. Now, it doesn't matter if not everybody on this team is a manager, right? So a little tip, when you have a certain management philosophy on Culture Pulse, that is usually how you like to also be managed, right? So if you're a leader, that might be, if you are a person that has direct reports, it's going to be your management philosophy. But even if you are an individual contributor, it's usually how you like to be managed. So people who manage more towards support are going to be the kind of people that do more check-ins, roll up their sleeves, get in there and do work. People that manage more towards performance are going to give you the goal. They're going to say, hey, I'm here if you need me. Here's the goal. Here's the metric. Have at it. Whereas the people that manage more towards support are going to be a little bit more hands-on. Now, if you have a person that their management philosophy is more support, right? That means they will appreciate more frequent check-ins, more people working side by side. If you have a person who their management philosophy is performance, they will appreciate not checking in so much. Hey, I'll let you know when I need you. Like, no news is good news. They're going to appreciate a little bit more hands-off approach. Hands-off does not mean not approachable. It just means a little less oversight. So to a person whose management philosophy is performance, if you check in with them a lot, they may feel micromanaged. But if you check in with Jason, and I will tell you this, like Jason and I work very closely together, and I'm always like a little worried, like I don't want to micromanage, but he's totally fine with it. He's like, great, yeah, you're here. It means like if I check in with him, he's like, fine. And we're colleagues, like I'm not, overseeing him, but we collaborate together and I might want to check in on something and he's fine with it, right? Whereas if I was doing that with someone towards here, they may be like, don't worry, I got it, it's fine, right? Jason's a lot more open if I'm checking in or asking him about something because he appreciates that support process. So what does that mean for you in terms of the team? So I'm going to go with these scenarios. So scenario 1 is you have a balanced distribution of team members, right? That's scenario 1. Scenario 2 is you have a leader who's on the performance side and a team who's on the support side. So what does that mean, right? So if I've got a leader who's over here, right? If I have a leader in scenario 2, they manage towards performance, but their team is all over here. That means their team needs them to be more hands-on, but their inclination is to set it. And I don't want to say set it and forget it because they're not completely removing themselves, but their inclination is to give you the ball and say, go ahead, run, right? But they need a little bit more support. So the leader has to be very cognizant if their team members or more of their team members are clustered over here, they may have to change their style with some of these folks, okay? Now, scenario 3 is that the leader is over here. The leader is more towards support. So the leader is all about checking in and getting together and having conversations, but the team is all over here. The team is like, yeah, I'm good, right? The team is like, I know that you're there if I need you. And so a leader who manages towards support, that's managing their team members that are managing more towards performance, those people are going to feel a tinge of micromanagement, right? And so so we have these multiple scenarios. If we've got this balanced distribution and you're the leader of this team, then you have a pretty big balance in terms of how people like to be managed, and you might have to shift a little bit, right? If you don't have this kind of balance, it might be challenging for you if you have a cluster and then you have the leader on the other side. So what does that mean, in terms of having conversations with folks, right? And so here are some coaching questions. So you want to ask yourself, how does the leader of the team's management philosophy, how does it compare to the rest of the team? That's the first thing, right? That's going to tell you something about the team culture. Because the reality is the team leader is going to have a strong command on what the culture looks like. And then how does the leader's management philosophy impact the current team culture? So if the leader is managing more towards performance, right, and you've got some people who need more support, how is that showing up? What does that look like? Well, you might have some people that feel lost, or you might have some folks that aren't sure what they should be doing because they need more contact, they need more frequency of team meetings. If you're a leader and you have a lot of people that their management philosophy is towards support, they will benefit from more frequent touch points. They'll benefit from more frequent check-ins, right? Then you have to ask yourself, what do specific team members need more or less of to create more team alignment? So for example, if I'm looking at Culture Pulse here and I want to create alignment with this team, I know that these folks are going to need some more support to feel like they know what's going on. And these folks, I don't have to check in with them as much, but I want everyone to feel like they're on the same page. So I might have to be having more communications with these folks or more frequent touch points with these folks than maybe like these people over here, they might be okay with a monthly one-on-one, whereas these folks might need a one-on-one every other week, right? And so it'll tell you how to pace those communications, and it's okay to sort of change up your approach with people on this spectrum.
We had a question come in about the folks that are kind of like right in the middle. So I
Oh,
think that's Evan in the
yeah.
middle. Both the Evans actually, I think. Um, is that like circumstantial or how would
So,
you?
yeah, so what it is in any one of these assessments, even if you see someone who is sort of in the middle, like he's like a 52 or 53, like on disc, right? It means they can, like on D and disc, it means they can flex in that area. They're just more flexible. They can flex depending on the project. So, for example, a project that Evan owns that she's accountable for the metrics and it's her name on the line, she may manage more towards performance where she's focused on, making sure that everything gets done. Right. Whereas if a project that she's participating in where she feels like she needs a lot of information and she's the one who's participating and she's following someone else's lead, she may need more support, right? And so it depends. Yes, it depends on the circumstance, but it's a flex. It's a flexing. It's an ability to flex based upon the situation.
Thank you.
Awesome. And then how is the current management philosophy of the team and leader, how is it impacting team communication, team conflict, the employee experience? So how does it impact based upon how people are dispersed on the spectrum? How does it impact how we all communicate? How does it impact how we approach conflict? So, for example, people that are more towards support, they may appreciate a task conflict conversation. Whereas someone who manages towards performance, they're going to be like, "Let's go. I know what the issues are. I don't have to discuss it." Right. And so it may impact frequency of team communication, approach to conflict, and then it may also impact the employee experience. And the leader, it's not just up to the leader, it really is up to you as an individual contributor. If you notice that you are over here that you're over here and you notice that your manager is over here, it's also up to you to say, hey, I noticed that, we're pretty far apart on this. I'm a kind of person who appreciates a little bit more of a frequent check-in. So right now I know that we have our one-on-ones monthly, but it would be great if even if we had a shorter touch point more frequently, right? So you have to advocate for yourself as an individual contributor as well. If you notice there's a big spread between you and your manager, it's a good idea to then ask for what you need so that you can get the support that you need. So again, I feel this is, and also the other thing I also suggest, if you're a senior learning leader, I would create a team where you put certain clusters of leaders on a team in Cloverleaf so you can understand the management philosophy that you have in your organization. Ultimately, in an organization, you do want a wider spread distribution. If your organization has leaders that are all clustered here, and you look and compare that to the whole organization or the whole department where you've got more people over here, you're going to create a misalignment, right? And so you want to make sure that you are looking at the spread of your leaders on a regular basis. This could also be an indicator for training. If more of our leaders are managing towards performance, we might have to do some training and development with our leaders so that they understand how to support people that manage more, that their philosophy is more towards support. So this is a very simple measurement on Culture Pulse, but it can give you such insight into a team, into how leadership is operating in an organization, and that sets the culture for all of those teams. You're going to have a lot of teams with misaligned culture if if more of your leadership population is just on one end, but you have a wider diversity of management philosophy overall in the organization. Any questions at all about Culture Pulse? All right, I know we're running a little short on time. So here's what I'm going to do with instinctive drives. So I'm going to go over to instinctive drives right here. And I want to help you understand a little bit about how to even read instinctive drives. So these, the way that these are dispersed. So for example, if a team, I'm going to focus right now on whether a team is wired to use this instinctive drives or a team avoids an instinctive drive. So I'm going to focus there. In the interest of time, I'm going to stick to those two areas. So basically, if we look at this area of authentication, right? And this is a team, when a team is using an instinctive drive, they tend to use this drive more often than not collectively. So this particular team is set to use the drive to authenticate to get things done by personally owning and taking accountability. So when a team has more people at or above the neutrality line, that means they are wired to use that drive. When a team is set to avoid, right? So this particular team avoids improvisation, right? They don't want to do a lot of like on the fly work, right? They're going to use a logical approach, right? And so when you have teams that more people are under the line of neutrality, or then you're going to avoid this drive. Now you'll notice there's a 10 here. There are 10 people right on top of each other, right, that are wired to avoid this instinctive drive. So the culture of your team will be impacted by what drives your team is wired to use and what drives your team is wired to avoid, right? So we're going to focus right now. Consider which instinctive drives your team tends to use, right? So what you're going to do here on instinctive drives is you're going to look at where does it say use, right? And so when you look at use, so this particular team is wired to use the drive to authenticate, right? And there's some great content in here, right, of some pitfalls, right, that a team wants to look out for, right? And so, for example, they may overlook some of the more people issues, right, that they have to focus on because it may get in the way of getting things done, right? So it's important to bring up some of those team culture and people issues. So when a team is wired to use a particular drive, these are the conversations you want to have with the team. So you want to ask them to share how they believe that the team's instinctive drive that is in use impacts their work, right? So given the fact that we are wired to use this drive, right? If you use this drive more often than not, how does this actually affect you? How does it impact your day-to-day work? Well, when I'm in team meetings and we're not getting to the point, I want to get to the point, or I want to make sure we articulate the goal. While more people use this than avoid it, what's the team experience for the smaller group of people? So you want to know, while this team is wired to use this drive, you have these people like myself, Grant, and Evan, we're not. We're below it. So you want to make sure that the minority voice gets heard here, so that's how you create cohesive team culture. What do these folks want these people to understand about how they work, right? Because they don't use this drive. The majority of the people are wired to use this, but a few of us aren't. And so what you're trying to do by using this is you're trying to create more cohesion and more team understanding in your team culture. So this is very high level. It will change based upon what your team is wired to use. Now, on the other hand, and you also want to ask, how can we better support each other's drives when working together, right? So I would want to know from those people that, like myself, how can we support each other? What support do I need? Because I tend to not use this drive. On the flip side, you want to also consider which instinctive drives your team tends to avoid, right? So this particular team, you've got 17 people that avoid this improvisation instinct, right? So they avoid doing this, right? They're going to take a very step-by-step approach. They might brainstorm less. They might miss opportunities to be creative, right? Because they're taking that logical, sort of spreadsheet-based approach to getting things done, which is important, but it leaves some gaps. So again, you're going to ask people, hey, how is this impacting us? We're avoiding this drive to improvise. If we avoid this drive more often than not, how does it show up? Like, what particular areas could we be improvising more than we're not right now, right? And more people are tending to avoid improvising. So we also, at the same time, we want to know what's the experience for the other people. So these people up here, they're all going by, they're like, I'm up for improvising. I want to get into the minds of these folks and say, how can I work together better with that, right? And so again, we're creating this conversation for team collaboration. And then how can we better support each other? Like, given the fact that that more of us avoid this drive to improvise, how can we better support each other? How can we support our friends that are flying by the seat of their pants, right? And so just these two activities here can really set you up for understanding, helping to bridge the gap where there might be groups of people that work differently, and helping them to hear each other. You're just facilitating a conversation. So whether you're the leader of the team, whether you're the individual contributor of the team, you're allowing those voices to be heard so that the team can understand more about each other. Any questions